Imagine a young nation just really starting to find its feet, but already looking out, way out west, seeing not just empty land, but a future, an inevitable destiny almost, stretching across the whole continent. What fuels that kind of ambition, that belief? It's a huge question, really.
It absolutely is, and it shapes so much history, not just in America.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into a really powerful and honestly pretty audacious idea from American history, manifest destiny.
That's right, a phrase that popped up in the mid-19th century and just fundamentally reshaped the United States.
We're talking massive expansion, but also huge conflict.
Exactly. So our goal today is to unpack what this concept really meant. We'll look at the different motivations pushing people west between about 1844 and 1877.
And how that translated into actual politics, right? Like government action.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And even how it connected the U.S., surprisingly, to the wider world, far beyond just North America.
Yeah, stick with us for this one, because it's not just about grabbing land, is it?
Not at all. It's this really complex mix. You've got ideas about God's will, huge economic dreams, people seeking religious freedom, clever, sometimes forceful diplomacy.
And it all echoed outwards across continents, leaving this legacy that, well, we're still dealing with today.
Definitely. Okay, so let's dive in.
Let's do it. Where do we even start with understanding manifest destiny, the core idea?
Well, you have to see it as this fundamental American impulse, this drive westward that was already there. But Manifest Destiny gave it a name, and crucially, it gave it a kind of moral and political justification it didn't quite have before, made it seem inevitable, righteous even.
Right, so who actually coined the phrase, gave it that name?
Okay, so the person credited is a newspaper editor, John O'Sullivan, and this was in July 1845.
1845. And he basically just put into words what a lot of people were already feeling.
Pretty much. He articulated this widespread, maybe sometimes unspoken belief about America's path. Giving it the name Manifest Destiny gave it incredible power.
The way he put it,
Yeah.
it wasn't subtle.
Not at all. The quote is really something, he wrote. And that claim is by the right of our manifest destiny to overspread and to possess the whole of the continent.
Which Providence has given us. There's that divine angle right there.
Exactly. For the development of the great experiment of liberty and federated self-government entrusted to us.
Wow. So Providence, God gave America the continent. That's quite a claim.
It's incredibly potent language. It explicitly frames manifest destiny as a God-given right. Not just an opportunity, but a right for Americans to own everything from the Atlantic to the Pacific.
And it didn't stop there, did it? Later, that idea stretched even further.
No, it didn't. Later, that same thinking was applied to justify interest in islands in the Pacific, the Caribbean. The ambition kept growing.
So it's more than just land acquisition. It's wrapping it up in divine will, making it seem like a duty.
That's it, exactly. It provided this powerful moral, political justification. It wasn't just expansion. It was spreading democracy, liberty, American values, which were presented as inherently superior.
And that narrative, that belief in superiority, that must have made it seem almost unstoppable, right? Like resisting it was resisting progress itself, or even God's plan.
Precisely. It created this powerful ideological momentum. It framed expansion not just as desirable, but as necessary, almost preordained. And that made it very difficult to argue against.
Okay, so the big idea, the justification is in place. But what about the individuals, the families? What actually made people pack everything up and head west? What were the kind of on-the-ground motivations?
Well, there were several big drivers, often overlapping. One huge one was resources, natural and mineral wealth.
The gold rush.
The California Gold Rush, yeah, kicks off in 1848. Suddenly, there's this massive flood of people heading west, hoping to strike it rich.
Just this magnetic pull of gold.
Totally. And it wasn't just California either. Soon after, you get gold and silver discoveries in Colorado, Nevada, the Dakotas. It kept feeding that westward migration.
A continent-wide treasure hunt, almost. But surely not everyone struck gold.
Oh, absolutely not. Many people arrived expecting easy riches and found, incredibly hard work, disappointment, even danger. But the dream of striking it rich was powerful.
So, besides gold, what else?
Economic opportunity more broadly, especially land. The government passed things like the Preemption Acts in the 1830s and 40s.
And those made land cheap.
Very cheap, yeah. Huge areas became available at low cost. That was incredibly attractive to farmers, people wanting their own piece of land, a fresh start.
But wasn't the journey itself really expensive and difficult?
It was. That's a key point, actually. This westward migration, especially early on, wasn't really for the poorest people. It was mostly middle-class folks who could afford the wagon, the supplies, the time off it took to make the trip.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the opportunities weren't just mining or farming. Think about someone like Luzena Wilson during the gold rush.
What did she do?
Instead of mining, she saw all these miners needed food and lodging, so she started a boarding house. And she actually became quite prosperous doing that.
Ah, smart. So it shows there were other ways to build a life out there.
Exactly. It illustrates that broader economic drive. Then there's another powerful motivation, finding religious freedom.
Like the Mormons.
The Mormon migration is the classic example, yeah. Between 1846, 1847, thousands of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints facing really intense persecution, violence even, in the Midwest.
Right, they were driven out of places like Missouri and Illinois.
Exactly. So under Brigham Young's leadership, they made this incredible trek west. They settled in what was then basically remote Mexican territory in the Salt Lake Valley.
Establishing Salt Lake City.
Establishing Salt Lake City, yeah. And creating a major settlement in the Utah Territory.
And their presence there, it actually helped the U.S. later claim that land after the Mexican-American War, didn't it?
It certainly contributed to the U.S. presence and eventual claim on those lands acquired in the Mexican cession. So religious motives had real geopolitical consequences.
Fascinating. Are there any other big motivations we should touch on?
Well, just the general sense of population pressure back east, combined with this really strong cultural idea, this feeling that expanding westward was just the American thing to do.
Like it was part of the national identity itself.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah.
For many, being American meant moving west, pushing the frontier. It was deeply ingrained.
Okay, so you have this potent mix. Belief in destiny, economic dreams, religious seeking, cultural identity. How does all this translate into politics, into actual government action that grabs huge chunks of territory?
This is where President James K. Polk becomes central. He's president from 1845 to 49, and he basically is manifest destiny in political form.
He ran on it, didn't he, in the 1844 election?
Absolutely. His platform was explicitly expansionist. He promised to annex Texas and secure the Oregon Territory for the United States.
And he won. So he saw that as
a mandate, a clear signal from the American people that they wanted expansion, and he acted on it immediately. Texas was annexed in 1845, right after he took office.
Now, Texas was tricky. It had been part of Mexico. Americans moved in.
Right. Starting in the 1820s, American settlers, mostly from the South, moved into Mexican Texas. By 1830, they outnumbered the Mexican inhabitants significantly.
And they brought their own culture, religion, crucially, slavery.
Exactly. They were largely Protestant. Many were slaveholders or okay with slavery. And they chafed under Mexican laws, like the requirement to become Catholic or the ban on slavery, big cultural clashes.
Which led to the Texas Revolution in 1836, the Alamo, San Jacinto.
Right. Texas declares independence, but then for almost a decade, the U.S. doesn't annex it.
Why not? Texas wanted to join.
They did. But Presidents Jackson and Van Buren worried it would mean war with Mexico, which still considered Texas its own territory. Plus, it would add another big slave state, upsetting the balance in Congress, so they held off.
But Polk didn't hold off. Or rather, his predecessor set it up for him.
Yeah, John Tyler, Polk's predecessor, actually pushed the annexation through Congress right at the end of his term. Polk inherited the situation, and it almost immediately led to conflict with Mexico, just as predicted.
The Mexican-American War.
The Mexican-American War. But while that was warring, Polk also dealt with Oregon.
Which was claimed by both Britain and the U.S.
Correct. Britain had long-standing claims based on the fur trade exploration. The U.S. claim was based more on recent settlement by missionaries, farmers, and this general desire for Pacific access.
There was that slogan, 5440 or fight, demanding a really northern border. Sounds aggressive.
It was aggressive rhetoric, yeah. But Polk, despite the tough talk, was also pragmatic. His administration negotiated with the British.
And they settled?
They did. They agreed to divide the Oregon Territory along the 49th parallel, which is the current border between the U.S. and Canada in that region. A diplomatic solution, surprisingly peaceful compared to Texas.
But this expansion, whether through war or diplomacy, it came at a huge cost to the people already living there, didn't it?
Yeah.
Particularly Native American.
Absolutely. And there was this disturbing rhetoric used to justify it. Figures like Francis Walker, a U.S. official, talked about Native Americans being essentially doomed to vanish as American civilization advanced.
That's chilling.
It is, and that kind of thinking was used to justify forcing indigenous peoples off their ancestral lands, lands that settlers wanted. It framed displacement and seizure as, again, almost inevitable, even necessary for progress. We have to acknowledge that dark side.
Definitely. Now, you mentioned earlier that this wasn't just about North America. How did westward expansion connect to global ambitions?
That's a really important dimension. Reaching the Pacific wasn't just about land, it was about trade, especially with Asia.
Opening up new markets, new routes.
Exactly. Look at the Pacific Mail Steamship Company, founded in 1848. Its whole purpose was to connect the coasts via Panama and then push across the Pacific, carrying mail, people, goods to and from Asia.
So connecting California directly into global trade networks.
Precisely. It physically linked westward migration to U.S. commercial expansion in the Pacific, and diplomacy followed suit. The Treaty of Huangxia with China in 1844.
What did that do?
It was the first formal treaty between the U.S. and China. It gave the U.S. most favored nation status, basically. Any trade deal China gave another country, the U.S. got two. And it gave Americans in China extraterritorial rights.
Meaning they weren't subject to Chinese law.
Right, subject to U.S. law instead. It significantly boosted American influence and trade power in East Asia.
And then there was Japan a decade later.
Yeah, the Treaty of Kanagawa in 1854. This is the famous Commodore Matthew Perry mission.
With the black ships.
The black ships, yeah. A show of naval power that essentially forced Japan to end over 2 centuries of near-total isolation.
And open its ports.
Open ports for American ships to refuel and trade. It was a huge moment, marking the U.S. as a rising power in the Pacific. Again, you see that expansionist impulse, that manifest destiny idea, now looking overseas.
So Manifest Destiny achieves this transcontinental nation, connects it globally. But it also caused major problems within the U.S., didn't it? Unintended consequences.
Oh, absolutely. We've touched on the conflict with Native Americans, and Mexico expansion wasn't peaceful. It was often violent and coercive.
But internally, the biggest issue was
Slavery, without a doubt. Every time the U.S. acquired new territory, especially the huge chunk from Mexico after the war.
the question became, will slavery be allowed here?
Exactly. Would these new lands be free or slave? It threw fuel on the fire of sectional tensions between the North and South. Polk's presidency, so successful in terms of expansion, dramatically worsened the divisions over slavery
Setting the stage for.
for the crises of the 1850s and ultimately the Civil War. The success of Manifest Destiny contained the seeds of the nation's greatest internal conflict.
Wow. Okay, so wrapping this up, Manifest Destiny was this incredibly potent force. It drove the U.S. across the continent, fueled by idealism, economics, religion.
A whole mix of things. But it also led to immense conflict, displacement, and deepened the very divisions that would nearly tear the nation apart. A story of triumph and tragedy, really.
And understanding this period, it really helps you see how ideas about national identity, ambition, even global trade, how they all intertwine, doesn't it?
It really does. It shows how powerful a narrative, a simple phrase even, can be when it taps into deep-seated beliefs and ambitions.
So a final thought for you, our listeners, to maybe chew on. When you look at the motivations and the consequences, the triumphs and the costs, what do you think is the true price of destiny when a nation pursues it with that kind of intense conviction?
Yeah, and how do those old narratives of expansion, ideas maybe rooted in divine right or national exceptionalism, how might they still be echoing today in politics and culture around the world?
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.